There is no such unique sisterly bond you find in fiction or films. Jessica was almost a different generation, 10 years old when I arrived. I was still playing with dolls while she was initially developing her first crushes in high school. Like many others whose children live far apart, our parents seemed to have particular affection for their firstborn. In their view, Jessica could do nothing wrong, and that pattern persisted far into our adult years. Jessica was getting married to David, a local accountant she had met at church, when I turned 18 and started college in our hometown. Her wedding day comes quite clearly to me. She was shining with delight, and our parents were shedding happy tears. Just pleased I could save money by living at home while in college. I had no idea just what that choice would cost. Jessica lost no time in adjusting to her housewife duty. She said she was pregnant within months after the wedding. "Isn't it amazing, Robin?" She let out a scream. "You are going to be an aunt." Not understanding that this statement would totally ruin my college experience, I agreed and smiled. Jessica started showing up at our parents' house unannounced 3 months after little Tommy was born. "I just need a break," she would remark, almost thrusting Tommy into Mom's arms. "I will be back in a few hours. Robin can help. Her house anyway." Mom would knock on my door while I was in my room surrounded with notes and textbooks. "Robin, honey, could you check Tommy while I finish dinner?" It got to be a daily ritual. A wailing infant and my mother's soft but tenacious demands for assistance always broke through my study session. Though it was taxing, I tried to balance everything. Then, after Sunday supper, Jessica delivered another bombshell just when I felt I had partially adapted to the circumstances. "We are having another baby," she declared. "Tommy's going to be a great brother." 2 years later, I was in my last year of college, trying feverishly to get ready for my tests while juggling 3-year-old Tommy running wild through the house and infant Michael screaming at high speed. One afternoon after she dropped both children off so she could go to the movies with friends, Jessica, I asked, "Have you considered hiring a babysitter?" She looked at me like I had advised her to sell her children. "Do you know how expensive babysitters are these days?" she said sarcastically. "Besides, why should we pay someone when we have family who might watch them for free?" Our mother, wearing reading glasses and chasing Tommy throughout the house, simply nodded absently. She was not very bothered, of course. Her firstborn, Jessica, was lovely, and she never denied her anything. Our house had descended into total anarchy meanwhile. Tommy left a path of damage wherever he went, treating every room like his own playground. When I woke up one morning, he had used my notes as sketching paper and dumped all of my college folders on the floor. Constant background music for the chaos came from baby Michael's piercing screams. "Robin," Mom strained her voice when she called one day. "Kindly assist with the boys. I can't manage them any more today." I heard something crash downstairs, and then Tommy started to laugh brilliantly. "I am unable, Mom," I cried back through my shut door. "I have finals next week." "You are being selfish," Dad's voice added to the tumult. "Your nephews are these. Family is helped by family." To cover their words and the sound of another basement collision, I turned up my music. As I underlined key sections in my textbook, my hands shook. Though I felt bad, I also understood that my whole future would be compromised should I fail these tests. Though the next 2 weeks were demanding, I graduated with honors despite ongoing interruptions. Finding my own apartment came first once I had a job with Anderson and Associates. The starting salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to rent a small 1-bedroom apartment across town. That first night in my apartment was the most peaceful I'd experienced in years. No screaming, no crying, no chaos, just less silence. 2 years passed, and I'd managed to create a comfortable life for myself. Then came the news of Jessica's 3rd pregnancy. "It's another boy," Mom told me during one of our weekly phone calls. Isn't it wonderful?" "Yeah, wonderful," I said, already imagining the increased chaos. "How are you and Dad handling Tommy and Michael these days?" Mom sighed. "They're energetic. Jessica still brings them over every weekend. Says she needs a break. Now, with another baby coming." Her voice trailed off, and I could hear the exhaustion she was trying to hide. During my next visit home, I found my parents looking older than their years. Tommy and Michael were racing through the house, playing some game that involved throwing all the couch cushions on the floor. Jessica had just dropped them off before heading to brunch with friends. "Mom, Dad," I said carefully, watching them chase after the boys. "You know you don't have to do this, right? You can say no to Jessica." Dad turned to me, his face red with either exertion or anger. "That's such a selfish thing to say, Robin. This is what family does." "There's nothing selfish about setting boundaries," I argued. "You both look exhausted." "You don't understand what family means," Mom snapped, even as she picked up another cushion from the floor. "You've never understood. When you have children of your own, you'll get it." I left their house that day feeling frustrated and sad. It seemed like nothing had changed. Jessica was still taking advantage. Our parents were still enabling her. And I was still the bad guy for pointing out the obvious. Over time, my weekend visits home became increasingly difficult to endure. Each time I walked through my parents' door, I found myself stepping into what felt like a war zone. Tommy, now 5, and Michael had developed a particularly nasty habit of turning mealtimes into food fights with 6-month-old Kevin, their youngest brother, usually ending up as their unwilling target. One Sunday lunch was especially horrible. I watched in horror as Tommy loaded his spoon with mashed potatoes and launched it across the table at Michael. Michael retaliated with a handful of green peas. Kevin, caught in the crossfire, ended up with baby food dripping down his face, sobbing while his older brothers laughed. I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough!" I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. "Tommy, Michael, get over here right now." They stared at me, amused to be confronted. "Look at this mess you've made." I pointed to the food-splattered floor and walls. "And look at your brother crying. This is unacceptable. You're going to clean this up now." To everyone's surprise, including my own, they actually started cleaning. Maybe it was the shock of someone finally standing up to them. That's when Jessica burst through the door, returning from her weekly spa appointment. "What's going on here?" she demanded, seeing her older boys on their hands and knees, wiping the floor. "They made a mess at lunch," I explained. "They're cleaning it up." Jessica's face turned red. "How dare you? They're just children. You're being cruel to them." Cruel? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jessica, they were throwing food at Kevin. He was crying. This isn't okay behavior. You don't have children," she spat. "You don't understand anything." I looked at our parents, hoping they'd back me up, but they just sat there, tired and defeated. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't stand up to Jessica, why they kept letting her take advantage of their kindness. Life went on like this for 3 more years, with me limiting my visits home to avoid the chaos. Then everything changed when I met James. He was nothing like anyone I'd dated before. Smart, kind, and most importantly, he understood the importance of boundaries. We met at a coffee shop near my office. He'd accidentally taken my latte, and we ended up talking for hours. After 6 months of dating, we introduced each other to our families. His parents, Robert and Diana, were lovely people who raised their voices about as often as they burned dinner, which was never. The contrast between their peaceful home and my parents' chaos was striking. Christmas had always been a big deal in our family, and this year was supposed to be extra special since James and I were newly engaged. Mom went all out with the decorations. The tree was beautiful, presents were wrapped perfectly in matching paper, and the house smelled amazing with all her holiday baking. When James and I arrived early to help, the atmosphere was festive and warm. My cousins, Mark and Sarah, were already there with their kids, who were quietly playing board games in the corner. Several of our relatives had traveled from out of town, including Great-Aunt Martha, who immediately pulled me into a tight hug. "Let me see that ring, dear," she said, admiring my engagement ring. "James is such a lovely young man. You two will be so happy together." Everything was picture perfect. Mom had outdone herself with the food. Dad was telling his favorite stories, and even the kids were well behaved, saying please and thank you when offered cookies. It felt like a scene from a Christmas movie. Then the front door burst open. "Merry Christmas!" Jessica's voice rang out, but it was immediately drowned out by the sound of her 3 boys storming into the house like a hurricane. Tommy, now 8, immediately ran straight into Great-Uncle George, nearly knocking him over. Michael, 6, started chasing his cousins, who had been quietly reading on the couch. 3-year-old Kevin was screaming at the top of his lungs for no apparent reason. "Boys will be boys," Jessica laughed, while her husband David stared at his phone, completely checked out of the situation. Before anyone could stop them, Tommy and Michael discovered the presents under the tree. They didn't just look at them or shake them. They started ripping them open. All of them, even the ones that weren't for them. "Oh my goodness," Great-Aunt Martha gasped as Tommy tore through a carefully wrapped package meant for my cousin's daughter. "I think I need to leave. This is too much excitement for me." She wasn't the only one. Within 20 minutes, half of our elderly relatives had made their excuses and left, unable to handle the chaos my nephews were creating. The dinner that followed was even worse. My cousins' children sat quietly, using their napkins and waiting their turns to speak. In stark contrast, my nephews turned the dinner table into a battlefield. Tommy and Michael were throwing dinner rolls at each other across the table, while Kevin was smearing cranberry sauce in his hair. "Children, please," Mom pleaded weakly, but they ignored her completely. The breaking point came when Tommy, with a mischievous grin, deliberately picked up his can of soda and poured it all over Mom's special Christmas pie, the one she'd spent hours making that morning. "Tommy," several voices shouted at once, but Jessica just laughed. "He's just being playful," she said, while David continued scrolling on his phone. I looked around the table at my relatives' faces, the shock, the disapproval, the discomfort, while my sister and her husband sat there, acting like this was perfectly normal behavior. I couldn't take it anymore. The sight of my mother's ruined pie, the chaos, the complete lack of discipline, it was all too much. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I can't stay here," I announced, my voice shaking with anger. "This is ridiculous. Your children are behaving disgustingly, Jessica, and you're doing nothing about it." The table fell silent, except for the sound of Kevin banging his spoon against his plate. Jessica's face turned red. "Oh, that's rich coming from you," she snapped. "You don't have children, Robin. You have no idea how hard it is to raise kids. When you have your own, then you can judge my parenting." I let out a bitter laugh and gestured toward my cousin's children, who were sitting quietly, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Really? Then how do you explain them? Sarah and Mark's kids have been perfectly well behaved all day. They use their manners. They don't destroy things. They don't throw food. How is that possible if children are supposedly impossible to control?" "Those kids are just different," Jessica sputtered. "No. The difference is that Sarah and Mark actually parent their children." I shot back. "When was the last time you made your kids face any consequences for their actions?" Jessica's eyes welled up with tears. "You're so cruel. You've always hated my children." "I don't hate them," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I hate watching them grow up without any guidance or discipline. Hate seeing Mom and Dad's house destroyed every time you visit. I hate that you think this behavior is normal." James stood up beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I think we should go," he said quietly. Jessica was full-on crying now while her boys continued their chaos, completely unfazed by the drama unfolding around them. David finally looked up from his phone, seeming mildly annoyed by the disruption. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. "Sorry, Mom, but I just can't watch this anymore." James and I left to the sound of Jessica's sobs and Tommy's triumphant yell as he launched another dinner roll across the room. 2 months later, we were sitting in our apartment, working on the wedding guest list. The Christmas disaster was still fresh in our minds as we looked at the names. "We can't invite the boys," I said, finally voicing what we were both thinking. "They'll ruin everything. Can you imagine them during the ceremony? During the reception?" James nodded. "What if we just make it completely child-free? No kids under 16, period. That way it's not personal. It's just a blanket policy." "You don't think people will be offended?" "Some might be," he admitted. "But if it applies to everyone equally, it's harder to argue with. Sarah and Mark might be disappointed their kids can't come, but at least they'll understand it's not targeted at them specifically." I thought about the peaceful ceremony we'd been planning. No chaos, no food fights, no screaming children. Just an elegant celebration of our love, surrounded by mature guests who could actually appreciate the moment. "A child-free wedding," I repeated, trying out the words. "You know what? I actually love it." I chose a Sunday afternoon to break the news to my family. In retrospect, maybe I should have done it when Jessica and her kids weren't there, but finding them absent from our parents' house was like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. As soon as I walked in, I had to dodge a remote control flying through the air, thrown by Tommy while chasing Michael. Kevin was crying on the floor because his brothers had knocked over his blocks for the 3rd time. "Mom, Dad," I started, raising my voice over the chaos. "Jessica, I need to talk to you all about the wedding." "Sure, honey," Mom said, trying to clean up juice that Kevin had spilled on the carpet. I took a deep breath. "James and I have decided to make the wedding child-free. No children under 16 will be attending." The chaos stopped for approximately 2 seconds before Jessica erupted. "What?" she screamed, jumping up from the couch. "You can't do that. What about my boys?" "The policy applies to all children," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. "Not just yours. This is because you hate them." Jessica was turning red now, her voice getting louder with each word. "You've always hated my children. You're a horrible aunt, a horrible sister." "No, I love your boys," I insisted, even as Tommy chose that moment to knock over a vase. "But you saw what happened at Christmas. The food fights, the presents being torn open, the ruined pie. That was just kids being kids." "No, Jessica, it wasn't. Mark and Sarah's kids were there too, remember? They didn't destroy anything. They didn't ruin Christmas for everyone else." "Oh, here we go again with the perfect cousins and their perfect children," Jessica screamed. "Well, you know what? You won't have to worry about my disruptive children at your precious wedding because we won't be there at all." I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "That's your choice," I said quietly. "If you'd rather not come to my wedding than attend without your children, that's up to you." Jessica stared at me for a moment, her mouth open in shock. Then she started gathering her kids' things, shoving toys into bags. "Come on, boys," she yelled. "We're leaving. Your Aunt Robin doesn't want you in her life anymore." "That's not what I said," I started, but she was already herding the boys toward the door. "I hope you're happy with your perfect, quiet wedding." She spat over her shoulder. Then she slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. After Jessica stormed out, I turned to my parents, expecting to find understanding in their faces. After all, They've been dealing with my nephew's chaos for years. Instead, I found them looking at me with disappointment. "How could you, Robin?" Mom's voice was quiet, but sharp. "Those are your nephews." "Mom, you've seen how they behave?" I said, incredulous. "You saw what happened at Christmas. They're just children," Dad jumped in. "You're being incredibly selfish." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish? How is it selfish to want my wedding day to be peaceful? One day that I want to be perfect without food fights or screaming or chaos. Dad's face hardened. "Then you need to reconsider your decision. Either invite your nephews or we won't be attending either." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at their faces, these parents who had watched their house be destroyed countless times, who looked older than their years from the stress of handling 3 unruly boys, who were now threatening to miss their younger daughter's wedding because she wanted one peaceful day. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "That's your choice. Don't come." I left their house and drove straight to James's place. When I told him and his parents what had happened, they immediately rallied around me. "You're absolutely right to want a peaceful wedding," Diana, my future mother-in-law, assured me. "Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about that." That evening, I made it official. I posted the announcement on Facebook. "James and I are excited to announce that our wedding will be a child-free celebration. We look forward to sharing our special day with our adult guests in an elegant, peaceful atmosphere." The support was overwhelming. Cousins, friends, and even distant relatives liked and commented with their approval. Sarah, my cousin, wrote, "Completely understand. We'll arrange a sitter for the kids. Can't wait to celebrate with you." Then Jessica commented, "Shame on you, Robin. You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness. You've always been jealous of my children, and now you're excluding them from this important family event. I hope you're happy with yourself." The response was immediate and unexpected. Relatives who had witnessed the Christmas disaster jumped to my defense. "Jessica, your kids destroyed the Christmas celebration," Aunt Linda wrote. "They ruined presents that weren't theirs through food and drove half the family to leave early. Maybe instead of attacking Robin, you should focus on teaching your children how to behave in public." Great Aunt Martha chimed in, "Robin is not the problem here." Comment after comment appeared, each one recounting another instance of my nephew's bad behavior and Jessica's lack of parenting. The post turned into a catalog of years of chaos and destruction, all of which Jessica had dismissed or ignored. Jessica's responses stopped abruptly. For once, she had nothing to say in defense of her children's behavior, perhaps because, for the first time, she was facing unified opposition from the entire family. 3 days after the Facebook post explosion, my phone rang. When I saw Mom on the caller ID, my stomach tightened, but I answered anyway. "Robin," Mom's voice was soft. "Your post and all the responses caught your father's and mine attention. We were ignorant of the fact that so many others felt this way. Hearing everyone explain what happened at Christmas and all the other events. We will be at your wedding, honey," Dad said. "Either with or without your sister, you are due a great day." The relief was just too great. "Thank you," I managed to utter through tears. "That means everything to me." Following that discussion, I formally invited Jessica and David to a wedding together, including a handwritten note. "You two would be great to have here to celebrate with us. Though I know it's tough without the lads, this is really essential to me." Romance, Robin. Days went by without a reply. Jessica's quiet became her response as the RSVPs came in. The wedding day itself fulfilled all I could have imagined. The ceremony went smoothly and elegantly, without one interruption. At the reception, adults could really conduct talks without yelling over anarchy. Not one food item was hurled. There was no destruction of any decorations, except for my mother, who shed happy tears as she watched us exchange our vows. None else shed tears. "This is wonderful," Great-Aunt Martha remarked to me at the reception. So noble, so calm. James slid my hand beneath the table. He knew I was considering the vacant chairs Jessica and David ought to have been seated in. Mom called with news 1 week after we came back from our honeymoon. "Jess has not brought the lads over since your wedding," she continued. "She won't answer when I tried to call her." "She's punishing you for showing up to my wedding," I remarked gently. Mom groaned and said, "Maybe. But you know what? Your father and I feel rested for the first time in many years. At the end of the day, our house still is neat. Perhaps, maybe this is not totally horrible." I could see what she meant. Sometimes before they can be rebuilt correctly, relationships must break. Maybe this was the turning point for our family, the time when we at last admitted the issues that had been festering for years rather than acting as though everything was good. One day, Jessica will hopefully realize that my wedding was not about excluding her children. It concerned one day of calm. She should understand that letting her boys go wild is not doing them any favors and that their behavior is not normal or acceptable. Someday, I hope we will be able to reconstruct our connection on a basis of mutual respect and understanding. Until then, I recall a flawless wedding day surrounded by people who embraced and accepted my decision. I have my new spouse together with his devoted family, and I know that occasionally, even in trying circumstances or when it hurts, standing up for yourself is the correct thing to do.